45 years ago that the film The Exorcist focused worldwide attention on exorcism and possession. Oscar-winning director William Friedkin brought Bill Blatty's novel to the screen with startling imagery. Recently, Friedkin returned to the world of demonic possession, well, not literally, but through his cinema. This time, for real. His recent documentary, The Devil and Father Amorth, was released earlier this year. Take a look.
Father Amorth begins every exorcism by thumbing his nose at the devil. In the room are Christina's family and other priests to assist Father Amorth. Santa Maria, Madre di Dio, prega per noi peccatori, adesso e nell'ora della nostra morte. Amen.
William Friedkin.
Thanks, Raymond.
Great to see you.
Always good to see you.
It's a pleasure to be with you again. I want to first talk about something, clear something up for me. I read the New York Times last week. Maureen Dowd said that you claimed the 1949 case that The Exorcist is based upon was, quote, jive. What does that mean?
I didn't say that I claimed it was jive. The 1949 case, which took place in Cottage City, Maryland, misreported as Silver Spring
right,
and a bunch of other places. There's no evidence for that. There's no proof. What inspired Bill Blatty to write The Exorcist were reports of that case. News reports that said this had happened. This had happened, and it was a case of possession and a successful exorcism. Now, that just passed along into history without people bothering to do a lot of research about it. One fellow did and wrote a story that you can see on Wikipedia, which is definitive. It's called The Haunted Boy of Cottage City, Maryland. And it's pretty authentic. And I believe over the years that I'm not saying that the case didn't happen the way it was reported, but the fact that it was reported was what influenced Blatty.
Right.
He did not use any of the characters.
No, or
he
the
didn't use the
circumstances.
place, the circumstance, and he obviously had never seen an exorcism.
Amazing. Now, Bill said he came into possession of one of the priests, one of the exorcist's diaries years later.
That's what I've been told.
Did you ever see that?
No, but I've been told by Bill's wife that she still has the diary of the priest who did the exorcism, Father William Bowdern, at Alexian Brothers Hospital in St. Louis.
Wow.
In 1949.
This week, we visited a few of the iconic Georgetown locations featured in The Exorcist, and Mr. Friedkin gave us insight into each location. Bill, why this house? Why did you choose this house as the house where the exorcism was going to take place?
This is the house that Blatty had in mind when he wrote the novel. It was the closest house to the steps, but as you'll see, it wasn't close enough. But it was the house. This is the exterior of the house where we filmed The Exorcist. It's 3600 Prospect in Georgetown. As you will see in a moment, it is not anywhere near enough to the steps, which are a good, 25 to 30 yards away. So what we did, that fence was not there. We had to put up this fence for her later to protect the house, but that fence wasn't there. What we did was we built a false front and a false extension from the end of that house to where the stairs begin. A lot of scenes shot at that front door, both looking out this way and looking back into the house. This is the beginning of the area of the Exorcist steps. 75 steps from just a few feet away to the bottom. The false front came out to here where these trees are. The girl's bedroom window is just up there where I'm pointing, right up here. And the stuntman went out a window in the sound stage first. He jumped from the little girl's bedroom window in the sound stage, and it finished off with a shot of him coming out that window right above me, which looked exactly like the house was extended this far. The stuntman came out of where I showed you, and he landed on that first landing. That's pretty far. All of the steps and the corners were padded with rubber. So he was landing on a padded surface, and he was all padded, but it was an incredible jump from right up there where I just showed you to the first landing where he hit. And that's the only place from which I filmed the jump. I also rigged a camera. There's a shot in the sequence, if you see it again, where I rigged a camera on wires to go out the window so it looks like a POV shot, all the way to the bottom, where that gentleman is now, and over that plate is where Father Karras dies in a pool of blood and receives the last rites from his friend, Father Dyer.
Now, why 45 years later would William Friedkin go back and focus again on something you said you'd never focus again on in film? And I quote you, "I would never do anything with demonic possession or exorcism in it." Why do this documentary now?
Because I believe in its authenticity, and I would never do anything, I still say, in fiction. I would never do a fiction version of it again. I had the opportunity to meet Father Amorth quite by accident. I asked him if I could interview him for Vanity Fair magazine. He gave me a long, it turned out to be 6,500-word interview.
Wow.
For Vanity Fair.
That's a book.
Yeah. And it was reprinted everywhere. And during the course of the interview, he's the most spiritual man I've ever met, Raymond. And I asked him at the end of the interview if he would ever allow me to witness an exorcism, thinking he would not. And he said, well, let me think about it. And a couple of days later, I got an email from his, the head of the Pauline Order in Rome, who said that Father Amorth would allow me to witness an exorcism on May 1st of 2016.
Wow.
And I had originally met him in March. So once he said, okay, you can witness this, which permission is never granted.
Right, never.
I can tell you, never, and rightly so. I then pushed my luck and said, well, would you let me film it, Father? And word came back 2 days later saying you could film it, but alone, with no crew and no lights. So I went in with a little still camera that shoots high-definition video and sat 2 feet away from them while they were doing it.
Wow. Now, you say The Exorcism, and Bill Blatty used to tell me the same thing. The Exorcist, he said, is about the mystery of faith. Is that what this documentary, The Devil and Father Amorth, is?
To some great extent, certainly. I mean, there's no proof of anything, Raymond. There is not one person in this entire world that knows, the greatest philosophers, religious scholars, whatever, do not know if there is a heaven, a hell, an afterlife, why we were born, what our purpose is here. It's never going to be revealed until, let us assume, there is an afterlife. But Bertrand Russell, Teilhard de Chardin, all were offering informed opinion and belief, but there's no hard evidence. If you need a fact, there are those who need to have their hands in the blood in order to believe. Now, I have tremendous faith in the teachings of Jesus. I believe in the teachings of Jesus Christ, but I don't know anything, and neither do people 1,000 times smarter than me.
Give me a sense of what this means to you as a filmmaker. You started your career doing a documentary about a man on death row, The People versus Paul Crump. And here you are, all these years later, doing another documentary, focused really on the thing you're probably best known for as a filmmaker, exorcism, The Exorcist. Why make that journey? Any trepidation about turning this into a film once you had the footage of the real exorcism?
Yes, and I didn't know what I was going to do with it. I filmed it because Father Amorth allowed me to film it, and the woman and her family said, okay. Then I thought, well, I didn't think I would make a documentary out of it. I thought I would have this to show to interested people. And then I got the thought to take it to some of the leading brain surgeons in the country and the leading psychiatrists.
Why'd you do that?
Well, I felt that they would either debunk it or explain in medical and psychological terms what it was. The brain surgeons had no idea what this was and said in the documentary to a person, including the guy who's in charge of brain mapping, you know, in this country. And he said, we don't know what this is. We've never seen it before. And this is not a problem of her brain, even though everything originates in the brain. But we couldn't operate on anything. This is not epilepsy. This is not a lesion.
Not dementia.
The psychiatrist then said that in the DSM-4 and the DSM-5, they now recognize possession. And it's called dissociative identity disorder, demonic possession. And they treat people who believe they are possessed. They don't say, no, you're not possessed. They get an exorcist, as well as their therapy and medication.
Unbelievable. Tell me what you captured. You go in, you're holding this still camera up.
That shoots high-def video.
And Father Amorth is going through the ritual. This girl, Christina, is there. She is afflicted. What are you seeing?
I'm seeing a complete change of personality. Strength that a woman of her size and age could not possibly possess. She was held down by 5 strong men, or she'd have come out of that chair. And I'm seeing her unravel before my eyes during the exorcism. When she came into the room, I thought, what is this woman doing here? She seems totally normal and together. And then she sat in the chair where Father Amorth did most of his exorcisms for 31 years, and she unraveled completely. And he went through the ritual, and she was in great pain and suffering. So initially, I was terrified of what I saw, and that turned into empathy for her, because she was in tremendous pain.
What surprised you about this? I mean, if anyone's captured what in the pop culture mind is an exorcism, you did that already. What surprised you about the reality as opposed to the fictional creation?
The complete change of personality, physically and mentally. A complete alteration. It's as though you suddenly sat there and started to freak out and do the weirdest imaginable things, like Charles Manson or something. But worse, otherworldly. It was otherworldly.
Ma lui a fissarlo, perché tu non conti una cicca, dove non conto una cicca. È la mia! È la mia! È la mia! È di Cristo!
Now, I did not pump this up. This is not made to scare the hell out of people, or it's not a horror film.
There are no special effects dropped in?
None whatsoever. It is a recording of an actual case of possession and exorcism. And I believed in Father Amorth, and I believe that he had devoted the greater part of his life using his skills to help people. And I saw it and filmed it.
Now, you interviewed this Christina, the woman who's afflicted, possessed. What did she tell you about the experience from her perspective?
She had very little memory of what went on during the exorcism, but she experienced the fits and the symptoms that led to her having been exorcised 8 previous times. And in that sense, it's like psychiatry in that you don't go in for one visit and then you're liberated. Often it's a process that takes years. And Father Amorth was exorcising one man for 16 years.
Wow. What did you make of him?
I
First time
said,
you met him.
The most spiritual man I've ever met, extremely intelligent, bright, knowledgeable. The first thing I asked him was a question about why is Judas so vilified when Judas was simply a part of the prophecy? And he gave me an answer. He said, it's true, the prophecy was that the Messiah would be betrayed, crucified, and then resurrected. And Judas was the instrument of that. Jesus knew that Judas would betray him. And I said, so what's wrong? He's part of the prophecy. And Father Amorth said, well, he was not a good man. He was a thief. He was a fraud. He had other betrayals, other things that were wrong. So over the years, that reputation followed him. But if you carefully read the New Testament, he is not vilified by Jesus, but over the centuries, he has become the villain of Catholicism, of the church, and the man who betrayed Jesus. But that was part of the prophecy that led to Jesus.
Give me a thought about how this changed your understanding of what you imagined an exorcism would be. I would imagine preparing to shoot The Exorcist, I know from your book, you were obsessed with this project, with this film, and I'm sure you did copious research.
There wasn't much to do. Bill Blatty invented the modern concept of exorcism. There was nothing that you could read that would explain it or talk about it. Nothing.
The novel was self-contained, and then the script that followed.
Yes, and so, but to this extent, one of the psychiatrists I showed this to said to me, well, you know, it looks authentic, but it doesn't have the classic symptoms. And I said, what are the classic symptoms, doctor? He said, well, her head doesn't spin around and her body doesn't levitate. And I said, doctor, Mr. Blatty made that up, and I had to find a way to film it. But I've never heard of such a thing occurring.
No.
And Father Amorth never told. But Father Amorth, in his first book, which is why he agreed to meet with me, wrote about the film, The Exorcist, and said that while the special effects were over the top, it did help people to understand his work. So that's why he agreed to meet with me.
Amazing.
And we hit it off right away.
He told you something about Satan rules the world, and he's here at the Vatican.
Oh, no, he wrote extensively criticizing the Vatican and things that went on there, like the priest scandals. There was a murder of a young girl in the Vatican that he wrote and spoke about on television extensively. And he thought that many of the people in the Vatican were flawed. He wrote about it and criticized them when he felt it was necessary, and they never tried to stop him or cut him off. He was so beloved and believed in.
Yeah, and there were lines of people to see him. They would come all the time or try to get an appointment with him. He didn't see everybody.
You had to see a doctor that he approved first and a psychiatrist to see if they could help you before he would see them. But he wrote all of his letters in longhand, answering thousands of mails, much as he could. He'd get up in the morning and write answers to letters in longhand, write the address on the envelope and stamp the envelope. He didn't dictate them. He wrote to people and inquired further about their problems and agreed to see as many as he could.
Now, this woman who is the subject of the exorcism in your film, The Devil and Father Amorth, she and her family confront you at one point. They invite you out to their little town to, I guess, continue the interview. She had canceled a number of sessions with Father Amorth, but she contacts you and they say, oh, come and meet us here. You take the 2-hour drive. What happens?
We met finally after she changed the time and the place several times. We met in not an abandoned church, but a very old Etruscan church in the town of Alatri, about 100 miles southeast of Rome. and it's a very religious town, Raymond. Pictures of the saints in oil outside every house, under glass. And I was going back there to film more stuff with her, and she had freaked out. She was possessed again, if not worse, and being held down only by her boyfriend, who was very powerful. Davide was his name, is his name. He held her around the throat and around the waist, and she was in a folding chair and dragging him. He was about 6'3", 6'4", like built like a lineman, and she was raging. And he was saying, "Don't show this film. People will celebrate the devil's work if you show this film." And she, in the demon voice, was saying, "No, no, I want it shown. I want this shown." Like this, "I want this shown." But louder and more disturbing.
And so do you think that was Satan speaking?
I don't know.
Or was that her struggling to get her message out?
Raymond, I just don't know. But she was speaking in a different voice and demanding that it be shown. While her boyfriend was saying, you know, it would glorify the devil. Now, so I had certainly a moral problem there. Was I going to show this or not? At the time, I didn't know what I was going to do with it. It was a home movie. But then I decided that I saw this. People should see it and make up their own mind. This is really what is known as possession and exorcism in the Roman Catholic faith. This is it. It's as close as anyone's going to see. Most priests have never seen one.
No.
I don't know any who have. And most cardinals or bishops, there very few popes were exorcists. John Paul II was an exorcist in Poland and left 3 cases to Father Amorth, one of whom he was exorcising for 16 years.
Now, you shot this exorcism before our friend Bill Blatty died.
Yes.
Did Bill know about this project?
I told him all about it, and I was planning to take it back to Georgetown and show it to him when I got it together. And he didn't live long enough for that.
What did he think?
Bill obviously maintained his faith, as far as I'm concerned, right to the end, and so believed in the possibility, if not the probability. I mean, Bill had come through a lot of changes in his own life, but maintained his faith and wrote The Exorcist as a believer. And I directed the film as a believer, not as a skeptic. I'm not a skeptic, but I don't have any finite answers to anything. Do you?
No, well, none of us do. Our job is to ask the questions. I always tell people that they get upset sometimes. You know, why do you have to ask that? Well, that's our job. I press. But whether I'm doing this or I'm writing a novel or you're doing a film, our job is to raise the questions so that the viewer can seek those answers.
But you strongly believe in the existence of the Holy Trinity.
And God himself, of course. Well, and you see evidence of that in the natural world. But
or you don't.
Well, I do, and you can try to share that vision.
Yes.
But whether somebody else sees it, you can't give them your eyes. But you can lead them and help them see a different way.
It is the mystery of faith, Raymond. And I'm not skeptical about it. Because I hasten to add that I have no answers.
You believe Satan was present in the room when you were there with that girl and Father?
Well, look, there's evil in the world. There is evil. No question, in the world. And there's good and evil in all of us.
Right.
And sometimes it manifests itself, whether we want it to or not. Road rage at the simplest level. But it is there. And Satan to Father Amorth represented that evil. But he did believe that he had dialogues with Satan. And I'm going to tell you this. He told me that at one of the exorcisms he did with this woman, she recounted his sins to him. And it was accurate.
Wow.
She was correct. I did not press him and ask him what his sins were. I had at least that much of a level of taste as to not go into it.
Yeah.
But he told me that they were accurately portrayed by this woman in the demonic persona.
And in Latin, and they speak different languages.
She understood Latin but had never studied it. And the exorcism is, of course, in Latin.
In Latin, yeah.
And but she understood it and could converse with him in Latin. And very often in the voice of the demon. But look, I don't know. I can't tell you that I believed in Father Amorth and still do. That because of what he said and did, I was dealing with something that was real.
Real. You interview in the film one of his assistants, Father Amorth's assistants, and his sister was possessed. And he recounts to you what she went through. She does as well. Tell me what you learned there.
His name was Paolo Vizzavecchio, and he has his own insurance business in Rome, very successful man. He and she described to me the time when she was possessed and crawling up the walls and on the ground like a snake and hissing and reaching out to harm people and vomiting and going through many of the things you see in my Exorcist movie. The police were called. They wouldn't come in the room. The Carabinieri. They saw her in this state and would not come into the room. He got her finally to Father Amorth, and she and he describe it and what happened. She has very little memory of how her symptoms were, but he has total memory of it. Right. But she remembers being liberated by Father Amorth after many visits.
Did she feel she was being controlled by something else? Someone else?
She did, and I believed her. She had no reason to lie to me. I didn't know them. I found them through Father Amorth, and they had no reason to lie to me, but many people are aware of her story, and she's liberated. She is no longer possessed.
When you look back, as you look back at your body of work, everything you've done, this battle, this struggle between good and evil seems to be at the heart of all of it. Now, I would argue some of your latter films, Killer Joe and others, these are dark films, but it's still that battle.
Yes,
I think you see that?
Yes, Raymond, it's eternal. It's an eternal battle between good and evil to possess our body and soul, I believe. There is evil in the world.
Yeah.
Pick up a newspaper. Look at Syria. What is that? I'm not talking about the president's response. I'm talking about Assad gassing his own people. You know, now he's going to kill them in some way, but that's one example of many. And in history, you look at Stalin, who killed 20 million of his own people, and Hitler, who killed 6 million Jews and Catholics and homosexuals. How do you define that? Why is that necessary to achieve power? To kill all of the people who disagree with you, or don't even disagree. You just single them out, drag them out, and kill them. There is evil. I've seen it in my own sphere.
Yeah. What did Father Amorth and his lifelong example teach you, not about evil, but about good?
That a man was there willing to devote his skills and his life to helping to liberate people of what they believed had them completely in check and in choke. Their lives were not their own, and they went to Father Amorth as a last resort, and he liberated many of them.
But he never believed he did the liberation.
They always call upon Jesus to do the exorcism. That's what the prayer is. It's not the priest
saying, come out of there.
As in my film at one point saying, I cast you out. It's Jesus that they're praying to cast out the demon. And that's what Father Amorth believed, and I believed in him, and still do.
What do you want people to take away from this project? After seeing this film, what do you hope it's going to accomplish?
Well, it was better said by Shakespeare in his play Hamlet, when he had Hamlet say to Horatio, "There are more things in heaven and earth than are dreamt of in your philosophy, Horatio." And that's my belief. I believe there's just so many things that I don't know or understand, but I'm still curious about, but don't know or understand. And hopefully this film, which is not fiction at all, not special effects, does not set out to terrify you or show you outrageous events. The possession enough is outrageous enough. But I believe that this film is a doorway into that, into more things in heaven and earth. And one of the doctors in the film that I interviewed, who I showed the exorcism to, said, well, and he's the man who's in charge of brain mapping, said, well, just because we don't believe in something or know something doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It's kind of a double negative, but it's true nevertheless. We don't know about this, but that doesn't mean it isn't true, or doesn't have a name, or will not get another name later, like radiation.
Right.
You know, they knew nothing about it when it occurred. Now it's a field of study.
William Friedkin, always a pleasure. Thank you.
Raymond, thank you.
I look forward to the next project, and we'll have you back.
I always love to come back and to watch this great show.
Thank you. You're very kind. Thank you.
Thank you, Raymond.
The Devil and Father Amorth, directed by William Friedkin, is out now on DVD and digital streaming platforms.